Hello, everyone. This is Ed Breniger. Welcome to the Eddy Network podcast. My guest today is David Kaszycki, and he's a startup guy. Is that a good way to describe you?
You can call it that. We're almost out of the startup phase, but yes,
Well, you
we're
started as a startup. Now he's going into
correct.
a scale-up guy. How's that?
Yes, yes,
Which
perfect.
I'm fascinated by people who start things. As you know, the circle of impact model is built around personal initiative to create impacts, and so that's what you've done. And I'm really impressed with what I see so far. So, David, tell us a little bit about yourself and what your endeavor is, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Certainly. So, as any good entrepreneur, I kind of always had the bug growing up. And so, always started trying to build something and tinker and ultimately solve problems for people. And started a couple companies as I was kind of moving up through uh, my years in high school and started one in college and actually decided to try to leave college and take a leave of absence to get that thing to work. Ended up not working out, but I learned a lot along the way and re-enrolled in school and finished up and just kind of knew that there was going to be another time where I was going to do something, but I was going to do it right this next time. And so worked for some major manufacturers for a number of years, primarily in the media and entertainment and pro AV space. So groups like LG Electronics that are putting LCDs and projectors and LED screens all over different types of environments, everything from professional sports venues to transit centers to large broadcast facilities. Moved on to another manufacturer in the space that served all of the major production companies with the number one teleprompter company in the world, number one battery company, number one kind of robotic camera system company. So they owned about 27 different brands that I had a part of, interacting with hundreds of customers on a yearly basis and ultimately visited close to 200 production facilities where they're shooting live sports, filming movies, doing broadcasts like CNN on a yearly basis. So as I was doing that and always knew, hey, something's going to happen. It had been about 10, a little over 10 years since I left college and finally started to see something in the groups that I was working with. And that's that these major enterprises are managing tens of thousands of different assets. That's camera systems, that's lighting, that's teleprompters, there's software involved, there's networking, really complicated stuff. And there's often hundreds of different manufacturers used in these spaces. And as I was working with the customers, kind of talking about our products and selling them, I just continue to hear the same problem pretty much everywhere I went. And that's ultimately that these groups can't manage all of this equipment reliably. The equipment itself was becoming more complex. Things that they didn't have to worry about 10 years ago, they now had to worry about. Security, firmware and software updates, the interconnectivity of all of these things. It was just becoming very complex. And they're using a mix of spreadsheets, lots of different tools to try to manage all this information from IT needs to know stuff about those assets to make sure we're secure and in compliance. Finance obviously needs to understand its financials, utilization, and then the engineers need to know, how do we keep this thing running? How do we get the most bang for our buck out of what we bought? How do we maintain it? And so across this, I saw that there was really a gap in the industry to bring all the data into one place from vendors and even internal stakeholders to give one view of the thing that these companies were managing and to allow each of those stakeholders and each of those companies to get the data they need. And so ultimately helping people save a lot of time and money in the assets they own, make better decisions, keep them up to speed a lot better. And the unique thing for us is that we really saw that data was the key, that if we could connect data in a really interesting way, we could really make a lot of people's lives easier. And so we left, I left my full-time job at that manufacturer in 2020 in the middle of COVID. Felt like it was a good time as they were putting me on kind of shortened work weeks. And unfortunately for them, it opened up a lot of extra time for me to work on this idea. Left in December of 2020, started Beam. And since then, we've grown to about close to 25 team members across the globe, a lot of engineers, of course, and developers. We work with some major brands, everyone from the UFC. We're working with some groups within Amazon. We're working with other large broadcast production companies. We work with major sports teams like the Carolina Hurricanes and the New York Mets. So it's grown very, very quickly and continues to evolve as we look for more problems that we can solve with our solution. And then, of course, all of the business side that comes along with trying to deliver value to a customer. It's not quite as straight line or simple as you would traditionally think when you read the paper about how much fun these startups are having raising billions of dollars and getting sold. It doesn't always go like that for majority of startups that I see. But we still push forward and are in a really good place as we look to start scaling our business and take that early success and really drive and repeat that over time.
So does this solution that you're offering, it obviously has a software application to it, but
Right.
does it also have a machine application to it? Does it take a particular kind of box that puts that is a connection between all these other machines and so they're talking to one another?
So we do not do that. And the reason is because that's actually a really good point. So there's a whole industry around that of major companies and enterprises that they call it device discovery or device telemetry, where they're actually talking to devices. So, all of your computers and phones, and you go install a Dell workstation and servers, those are inherently built on a modern infrastructure that's designed for interoperability and connectivity and remote login and all of these things that's built in the way that that's been done. But what's really started to happen in these other areas, which I call them tech-enabled assets and equipment that didn't used to have all of these interoperability. It didn't used to have software and firmware. It didn't used to have security requirements. It didn't even used to be on a network, right? It was a signal from a TV that would flow and eventually hit the airwaves. Right over the last 10 to 20 years, that's transformed. And so while these products, they didn't just flip over on day one and say, we're going from this and we're going to look exactly like an IT product. And that is really where the problem is that as these assets have evolved, they don't have that core communication infrastructure like is found in more of a traditional IT environment. It's just built different. There's a lot more vendors. There's hundreds of vendors, whereas what you're talking about, usually there's 5 or 6 manufacturers that are tied together. So the complexity is higher, and that's really what we saw is, why are these big tools, something like a ServiceNow, that would be kind of a major player in that, why are they not solving the needs of this industry? We even had our customers that are using ServiceNow, but they're like, yeah, but it doesn't serve our needs. It works really well for IT, but it doesn't work well for this stuff that looks and smells like an IT piece of equipment, but it doesn't act that way. It doesn't operate that way. It doesn't have those same things to deploy a box. So while we do talk to those types of information and systems, the way that these assets are deployed is actually not in a way that you can do it the same way you can do it for something more in the IT space.
So maybe this is too technical a question, or maybe it isn't. So are you really beginning with the experience that these companies are having with their technology, and that the experience is not serving them well, and so that you're providing a solution which enhances the experience, whether it's the company that's buying it to project it to their
Mhm.
customers, or whether it's the customers receiving this and they're being able to engage in the content that the company wants to provide to them. You're the solution. You're sort of, I'm putting it in a relational kind of context.
Mhm.
So you are kind of the mediator between two groups of people, and you're providing a software solution to help them communicate better together.
Yes. So where we actually started is, so I worked for major manufacturers, and now these products had these firmware and software updates. We were sending emails saying, hey, there's a new update for this, or this product is going end of life. And one of the major accounts that's global, I won't mention their name, but they had bought, $50 million worth of our robotic equipment. And we said, hey, these are going end of life. They couldn't pinpoint which 30% of those assets, so, 12, $15 million, were going to go end of life because they didn't have a connection to that manufacturer. So they had to go find emergency budget because from a security compliance perspective, we were no longer supporting security patches in the Windows update they needed to be on. So it had this trickling effect that 15 years ago, okay, it's end of life. We'll just run it until it goes into the ground. Today, if you've got something deployed that doesn't meet your IT security requirements, you're out of compliance. There's obviously ransomware and other types of cyber attacks that can happen. And so these are new problems that they didn't have to deal with. And so we were actually started saying, we actually took data from tens of thousands of industry vendors and said, upload your list of things you bought, hardware and software, and we'll tell you the manuals. We'll tell you if it's end of life and when it goes end of life. We'll give you the warranty information. We'll tell you firmware and software updates. And when you deal with hundreds of vendors and manufacturers, as these companies did, that's hundreds of places they need to go look. In IT, you've got about 5 places and it's built in a way that's automated. These devices aren't that way. And so we started there giving the people that work with those assets all the information that they need so they're not looking around. As that evolved, we started to see other people that needed to know information about those assets. So the financial team needs to do depreciation when there's service issues, they need to track those costs, they need to look for renewal cycles. But the financial team maintains a fixed asset list that is very, very different than the engineering team. Engineers call it camera one. On the fixed asset list in finance, they call it, Sony production cinema camera two, right? They're disconnected. Same with the service teams that were working on those assets. When something breaks, you're calling a different person. I need service. I need this fixed. They maintain their own list. And so what we saw is that within a single company, there was the same, we're all talking about the same, let's call it a camera to keep it easy. Everyone's talking about that same camera. Finance has its own view of it and data. Engineering has its own view. Service does. And even the manufacturer. We're all transmitting the same data, but because it's all siloed, it was basically impossible to create a really strong understanding of that. And so we're basically creating a platform that the asset is the center. And now all these different stakeholders can get the view to do the different jobs that they want to do related to that asset. So we see people actually removing other software tools because instead of having a different tool or spreadsheet in all these places, they just use Beam, but we designed it so they can all do the job that they need to do within our platform.
I think that sounds fantastic. Sounds like it's the next generation of software development that probably has been needed for some time, but you're the one of the first to identify that and move into that space and developing that next generation of application.
Correct. And I think what I saw is I saw the same problem everywhere I went, but it cost a lot to build software and to do it in the right way. So while each of those companies could identify the problem and potentially the way to solve it themselves, the ROI wasn't enough. And so that's where we came in to say if we had enough customers, we can sell this at a cost that gives them a really high return on investment for their software without having to invest the millions of dollars it actually would take to build that. And so that was the business that it's too expensive for them to build it ourselves. Could we build a solution that we could sell to lots of people for a lot less money that
Yeah.
made that math actually start to work?
Did you have a background in software design?
I do not. I have always been technically minded and have sold very complex products, but I'm not. And so that was something that we really had to shore up when we started the business, was
Yeah.
finding the right team and talent that really knew that. I'm, more on the sales side and business development, and so I can always talk to people and explain the vision and get both customers as well as investors to believe in that. But what we needed to start building was a team to actually execute on that vision and deliver on kind of the vision and the promises that we had given to customers and investors.
What you're describing experientially is very similar to what I experienced in the mid 90s when I became a consultant, an organizational leadership
Mhm.
consultant. And, the way I describe that is I'd never been a consultant and never run a business, but I started one, not knowing what
Mhm.
that meant. But what I found was all these problems, and they were
Mhm.
across the spectrum of organizations. So from mom and pop stores all the way up to global corporations, they were all suffering from the same problems,
Yes.
and that became the focus of my work. Yeah, and it sounds like that's what you have done, and that's
Correct.
I find that fascinating, and I think it's great. So, what as you went into becoming a an entrepreneur, what was the first thing that you encountered that told you that your life was going to be different? What was the experience of initiating the steps of being an entrepreneur?
So initiating, I think it was just the acceptance that sometimes you just got to jump in the deep end and hope you can swim.
Yeah.
You got to find a way. And I think we won a small grant towards the end of 2020 from an organization called NC Idea here in North Carolina. And that was enough of an impetus for me to say, okay, someone else validates this idea and believes in it outside of me and my partner that were working on it. And that kind of gave me the confidence to step out and say, all right, we're going to jump in the deep end. That means, the grant was not enough money to fund, what I was going to do, but it was a lot less money, that I would be taking home. I knew for a fact we'd have to raise a lot more money just to build the software and even get to that next phase. And so I think that really is the learning is that sometimes you just got to go in and find a way to get it done. And that has really continued to go throughout, our journey as a company and my journey is, growing as a leader, hopefully, within this industry is that you just have to solve the next problem and continue finding what that is, but you have to find a way to solve it. And I think a lot of people expect, a straight path when they go into it, or you can read a book and the book's going to tell you how to be an entrepreneur. But at the end of the day, you just have to find a way to swim. You have to find a way to stay afloat, to stay afloat, and you can rely on, advisors and mentors and investors. But at the end of the day, sometimes you really got to just brute force your way to stay alive until you really start understanding how to, stay afloat in the water.
So you're at a stage now where you're moving out of being a startup entrepreneur and you're moving into a scaling role for the company and how you. So what does that look like? Because I don't think people understand what scaling a new business looks like. I think they understand what entrepreneurs do because there's lots of stories and YouTube, and you can do this, but I don't think
Correct.
people talk to as much about how you scale something. Um, and so how do you approach that and what does that look like?
So it starts with the early stages of the entrepreneurial process, which is you're testing lots of things and you're continually iterating. The first product we thought was going to be the winner, we're going to sell $1 billion of, right? It didn't go as it didn't provide as much value as we expected it to
Mhm.
provide to customers, or it was more technically complex. And then you also take that product and you start to sell it. You understand what do people want? What are they actually buying? And so you start to develop all of these tests that you've run over time. And soon enough, those tests start to, you see some repeatability in them. Ooh, this customer type, we were trying to serve this entire market, but we found that this customer type really loves the product, or they're getting a lot of usage, or they're adding lots of users. And so we start to zero in on that. We start to test things with our sales efforts and understand that trying to go this direct sales approach versus working with partners, that this is actually more effective. Or so you're over time you're kind of continually iterating and testing, and you waste a ton of money, unfortunately, but you do waste a lot of money, and that's why a lot of startups need funding, particularly software startups that don't have an anchor customers, because you've got to be able to test all these things from what's the product people are buying, what's our pricing strategy we've changed 20 times, how do we actually market this so people know about us in the industry, And basically what's transitioned and is transitioning now is as you've run those tests, you start to find the things that work. And it's very costly initially because we're doing things in a very manual and automated or very manual process with not a lot of automation in there. So it's costly for us to run these tests, but it's cheaper to do that than to build out the scalability factor. So the technology that's going to help us scale, the automation, the marketing platforms, the sales teams. So those are really, really expensive to build out. And if we make the wrong decision too early, we could die because we picked the wrong scale factor. We thought that, and this happened to us at one point where, we thought a particular customer base was going to be our winner, and we invested a lot of money in automating some sales process around that, and ultimately was kind of a misnomer. It was a red herring that we chased, down the wrong path. And so it's first we have to look at the things that are actually repeatable, and then we start building the processes to make them repeatable. So it's more investment, but you kind of only get right now you can kind of test 50 ideas. To scale, you really got to pick the 3 to 5 or even
Mhm.
less that are going to work and put all the effort into maximizing that. And so it takes a while, but that's what we're starting to do is actually saying, okay, well, this is our best customer. This is the price point they're buying at, and this is how we acquired them, and we acquired these ones really quick. So let's see if we can automate that part of the process. That means we have to have new product features and functionalities that might support that customer. We have to have, the sales and marketing efforts. It's going to be pinpointed at that, but making it automated, putting the tools and the work in to make it repeatable. But it's costly to make it repeatable. But if you can get there, that's ultimately what scale is finding what's repeatable and putting in the tools and processes to make it repeatable, which is a tremendous amount of work. And then hopefully from there, it can start to really run a little bit more smoothly at a cheaper, long-term cheaper cost. But in the short term, it's very expensive to build that scale into the business.
And so you have, I would assume, a core of venture capitalists who are providing you the resources, the financial resources to help you to take these steps forward.
We've actually worked more with angel investors and smaller venture groups because it's interesting when working with those traditional and larger VCs that we've talked to a lot of, they've got certain things that they're looking to invest in a certain scale size. So how big is the total addressable market, for example, is a key criterion. So we always got hurt saying, well, media and entertainment and pro AV, it's big, but I don't know how big it actually is versus say healthcare. Everyone's like, oh, healthcare is huge. Your healthcare AI startup, great. We're going to give you some money because we want one of those 100 to work, and one of them will be the next Amazon or whatever it might be. And we're okay with that one working out and the others not. For us, they're saying, okay, we understand media and entertainment a little bit, but we don't really know how big it is. It's not an interesting space
But
from
you're
us.
new. I mean, you're the new player in this. You're not just a
Yes,
new player, you're creating a new platform, so to speak.
correct. And so even with that, it was hard to get some of the larger funds to really understand what the opportunity is within our market, as well as moving this to other market verticals that are even bigger. I mean, every single person that, every day you wake up, you're opening your phone, you're consuming a form of content, right? You're consuming this podcast, this video. There's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that you don't know about that makes that a reality. You're watching the Super Bowl. Um, and there's a lot of technology that makes all this happen. And I think what we saw is that it was hard for people to really wrap their heads and understand where the value we could provide because it is a complex problem that needs to be solved for these. It's a lot easier to say, hey, we're IT, we're going to use an IT protocol, and we're going to talk to these devices and help keep them up to date. That makes sense. It's super easy when I say, well, there's thousands of vendors, hundreds of products. There's all this interconnectivity. There's all these stakeholders. Their minds kind of start to boil. But unfortunately, that's the reality of the world. And so we relied more on industry individuals, people in the industry that knew how big this problem was. We relied on the people that believed in us as people that, hey, we are a team that can solve this. And that's ultimately what's allowed us to get to where we are. And now that we're having the success, you've got the bigger VCs and all of them looking at you. Um, but it's, the VC is not the only way to build a business. And I think for us, well, now that option is opening up, it's not something that we have to go down like maybe we thought initially. And honestly, I think it's better for what we want to do, uh, because we can build a very good and a very large sustainable company, for the years to come versus, is I feel sometimes hopping on a train that, you're going as fast as you can, and sometimes if that train crashes, that's okay because they've got four or five other trains that are running there, and you just got to get to the billion-dollar destination. And I think we've got something that we can still be incredibly successful without being a multi-billion-dollar company. Well, I still think it's there. I think we're providing too much value to our customers and the people that work for us as well, that we shouldn't put ourselves on a potential collision course. That yes, it can be up here and we still think it. I don't think we need to get on that collision course because we've built a really good business, that has strong staying power, for the years to come.
That's really exciting. I know that you uh, are one of the businesses that are connected to Winston Starts.
Mhm.
I've had Stan on the show, and
Yes.
talk about what that, because a unique in many ways. Like your program is unique. Winston Starts is unique because they're not the traditional startup incubator. It's much more of a scaling. Uh, I don't know what you would call that because it's so
Yes.
different and so new. So what's your experience like working with within that kind of community of other people that are like at your stage of development?
It's absolutely critical to be around people that are both building businesses as well as have built businesses. So the community here, so I actually moved from Atlanta. My wife is from this area, and so COVID hit. We said, let's try this business. Let's move up here. It's a good time to give it a shot. And the business could fail. We could hate it. We can always go back to Atlanta or somewhere else. We're not looking back, so we are here for the long run. But I think having a, an organization like Winston Starts really provided both the company and both me personally a way to get involved in the community and to have the support system around the business. So as the business evolves, right, you mentioned, hey, you're going from, the startup to now scaling. The people and the resources you need change tremendously from one stage to the next. And I think that's something that Winston Starts has done a great job of, is developing a large mentor pool of people that have been involved of businesses at different stages or have scaled them, that can actually help talk you through those stages. So we needed to bring on product managers. We had a great individual that's helping us with product management that had years and years of experience, and he helped train one of our junior team members to really step up to that next level to become really a top tier product manager. And so one side of it is the mentorship and some of the programming to kind of train you and get you up to speed on what you need as a business to be ready to scale. But the other side is the people that are in here every day. So I'm actually in Winston Starts now. The Flo and Don Flo has provided 2 floors of space in his building to early stage companies. And so every day there's companies of all different shapes and sizes, all different types of solutions and businesses and products they're delivering. Um, and that is probably one of the most rewarding aspects, is being able to talk to someone that's, a year ahead of you. Even 6 months ahead can be a big difference, or someone that's raised money, or someone that had problems raising money. Um, People that are trying to scale. So hearing their stories, asking for their advice has actually been one of the best parts of it. So oftentimes when I have a problem or issue, I don't first go to the mentors. I actually often first go to someone that's sitting right next to me and say, hey, we're trying to scale a sales team. I know you guys have built one. What was that like? And then we'll sit down and have a conversation. And usually you get a very candid conversation that you don't always get about the pitfalls and the challenges, because it's very difficult and very stressful starting a company. And sometimes you want your face to the world, look like everything is perfect and, there's no issues and we're going to be, the next Google. But in reality, it's a lot more challenging, a lot more, you know, I guess, discomforting, for what you have to go through on a daily basis. And sometimes you need others that are kind of in the trenches or have been in the trenches too.
And it's much better to have honesty and
Correct.
and reality than someone who believes in you and wants you to feel confident about everything. But that confidence doesn't work if you're going down the wrong path.
Correct. And on the flip side, while I'm helping people, asking them questions and getting the next phase for our business, on the other side of it, there's also people that are, have come up now that we've been here for 4 years almost, that are at the early stage of the business where we were 2 or 3 years ago. And I always say to myself, kind of jokingly, thank God I'm not there anymore. Is the first thing I usually say because it's a challenge. Uh, but it's very rewarding for me personally to be able to sit down and talk to them and say, hey, this is where I was, or this is how I got that. And so I think by having a community like that, the talent and the startups and the success rate is only going to continue to increase over time because of that community. So it's, well, the mentors are there and as they get exposed, but I think it's also this community is that, it's kind of you're standing on the shoulders of giants or standing on the shoulders of people before me. I think that continues to go. And for a community like Winston-Salem to have a group like Winston Starts allows the entrepreneurs to continue to learn and build off those that have been here before them. And so I'm really excited to be a part of that. And I really can see how that's affected our business. And I think, it's going to be even better and even more rewarding for the next group of startups and companies that come through. And that's why seeing that progress and momentum, even though it can be seem slow or look slow, I think that's really critical to building a great, entrepreneurial ecosystem and having that level because it takes time to build and to really reap the rewards. But that's why the success rate of something like a Y Combinator and some of those is so high is because they have that history, they've got that relationships. And so Winston Starts is really building that here and helping to connect that to other communities outside of Winston, which is exciting as well.
Yeah, I see that. I spent 6 years in living in Jackson Hole, and while I was there, I was a part of a startup cohort, and we met regularly, and we were talking about how to start and change and grow, and we're all doing very different things, and that interaction was really helpful in providing perspective. So I'm not going to be doing what you're doing, but how you're doing that helps me to see I don't want to go in that direction. I need to go in
Mhm.
this direction. And it was a very, very good experience. And I it's a little it's to say I fell in love with entrepreneurism is a pretty accurate statement to the point. And I'll just
Mhm.
throw this at you. I think that our school systems should be teaching entrepreneurship beginning at about fourth grade. Because if you came to this sense of being an entrepreneur after you finished college, right? Am I right about that?
Mhm.
So imagine if you had been 10 years old or 11 years old and you had done something in seventh grade where you and some other people had started something.
Mhm.
You had created your own little thing, and all of a sudden you've had this experience of starting something, of failing fast, of recovering and finding new things.
Mhm.
Imagine how all that education from seventh grade all the way through college would have benefited you as you had this sense of I can go and start anything I want.
Yes.
And all I have to do is start.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, there's a group in Atlanta that I actually done stuff with when I was a little younger called Junior Achievement that
Yeah.
has groups all around and they did have some of those capabilities, but it was a third party, right? It wasn't tied to the school curriculum. Um, and then even where I went to school, Furman University, they didn't have a entrepreneurial practice, but now they've added one and added a lot of resources and support around it to build it. But absolutely, and I think it just teaches you that you have to be resourceful And that's one of the keys to a good entrepreneur is you're never going to have enough time or money or even your effort level, right? You're only so smart and you're only so smart in the areas you're smart in. There's always going to be gaps. And I think it also teaches you one, just, hey, jump out and do it. But I also think it teaches you, I can be resourceful. I can find a way to deal with these gaps and these inefficiencies by finding a way to make it work. And there's more ways than one to make it work, right? I could be sitting talking to you for 80 different zigzags we could have taken. We happen to take this path, but I know if one of those other doors had shut, there was probably another door I could have taken to find a path in. And I think that's what entrepreneurship teaches you. And I think that's where other entrepreneurs I've seen have failed is because they do only take one door, or they scale too early, right? Where I said you put all your resources and you think this is the one that's going to do it, and it doesn't work out. And now there are no doors to open, and that's why scaling almost is forcing you to limit the doors you're going to open for a period of time, and it's got to work.
Well, I think what you're pointing to is that the the enterprise of being an entrepreneur is not just of the business that you're starting, it's also the development that you need to go through as a human being in order to
Mhm.
be at your very best for the process that you're going through. And if you're not comfortable with change, then you'll never make it. You have to embrace change at such a high level that it's not that there's one right thing or all things are right or all things are wrong. It's that whatever you're doing has to be right. You have to do it the right way. And I think that's hard. It's a hard thing for people who have never experienced starting something. It's hard for them to learn that. But
I agree. And I think the other thing is reality. So while change is there, reality is also reality. And I think a lot of people get into entrepreneurship thinking, I don't know what they think reality is, right? I have my visions, but vision is not reality. And you have to accept reality at certain points along the way, because that's the only way you know that you need to pivot. And that's where, mentorship and other founders that can help s- point out that reality, or I can do that to other people where it's like, hey, maybe this is the real opportunity, or why are you banging your head against the wall there? These people do love their ideas, right? I'm guilty of that myself, but people really do love their ideas. And it's sometimes hard to see the reality. And if you don't see it fast enough, that door is going to be closed, and you're just not going to have the time or money to do something else.
okay, here's my last question for you. As someone who has traveled this path, and you look at the world that you're a part of, the larger world, not just of Winston-Salem or the tech world, but the world at large. Where do you find, how do you feel about where the future is headed? Where is it leading us? Or do you have hope for the future? Do you feel positive about the future, or do you feel like the challenges are really so significant that it's going to be a very hard slog to go there? What's your thoughts there?
Well, I've always had this belief that each human being has more potential than they understand that they have. And a lot of times they need things to help them draw out that full potential. I had done some mentoring with children in a youth detention center in Atlanta. It was one of the most rewarding experiences. But one of the things I saw is the potential that some of these kids had coming from very tough places. And just by making a small impact of me showing up, once a week for an hour, right? It's not like I was changing the world, from what we would think. But that alone gave me it was probably one of the most rewarding things for me personally. And I think I got more out of it than even they may have.
Hmm.
Um, so I believe that there's going to be a great future, but we have to find ways to draw out individuals' potential. And while there are a tremendous amount of challenges. I think we have to teach more people how to solve those challenges. And that's where entrepreneurship comes in, that it's looking at ways to solve those challenges and giving people the okay to take that jump. And it doesn't have to be entrepreneurship. It can be research, it can be something that's, in the medical space, it can be something else, but being able to take that risk and go to the next step. And entrepreneurs are, traditionally known as risk takers, but any of these other endeavors, and So I'm optimistic about the future, but there's certainly some big problems that are going to need to be solved and addressed. And I believe that if we can help draw out the potential of those individuals, that's how we're going to succeed. But it's tough. I mean, I even think about it myself, where, idealistic and wanting to change the world and do these things. But even then, sometimes you're like, all right, I'm building a business, I'm doing this, but what is that longer term impact? I think that's, the other challenge that we're going to have is getting people to really look at the longer term and what their philosophies are, because they're being pulled in so many directions with media and social media and just the changing environment of, kids growing up today. I've got two young kids myself, and I've been thinking, what is that world going to look like? So while I am, positive and optimistic what we can do, I also don't discount the fact that we need to start instilling kind of a new way to approach this changing world that doesn't have, you know, you're pulled a lot further, so you don't quite as have that foundation and that structure that you had growing up. It's good in one sense, and it's, we're moving a lot faster and changing things and causing all sorts of good things and problems to have. But on the other side, I think we're also going to need to look introspectively and find ways that, what is that next generation of people that are growing up. So long-winded to say, I am optimistic. I'm also reserved about,
Well, I
what
think
we can
it's,
do for those
I,
people.
I think that's a wise position to take. I mean, I, I think my sense of hope is based on people being willing to take initiative,
Hmm.
um, regardless of what they're taking initiative on. But if they, take initiative to take care of their family, take care of their neighbor, build a business, support a business, promote a business. I mean, whatever it may be, that makes a difference, and it builds
Hmm.
this kind of resiliency that is needed in a community. But if people feel like the threat of taking initiative is greater than the opportunity that is embedded in it, then we have problems. So I see the greater risk is in not changing and not trying than in trying and changing. And and it takes people like you and others like the other folks here there at Winston Starts and the people that are downstairs at the flywheel wing,
Yes.
all of those people are doing things that matter in this community, and that's I think that's really important for people who are watching us to see is that this is not just something you're doing for you and your idea. This is something that will have a beneficial effect upon everyone that you know and everyone that your product line will be touching through its application. And I think that's important for people to understand because if they can see that in you, then maybe they can see it in themselves. And then they can begin again to
Mhm.
ask the question. So what is it that I can go do that really can make a difference that matters?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, David, I'm really glad to know you. Look forward to seeing you face to face. We'll have coffee or lunch
Absolutely.
or sometime. We'll do that soon. And but I thank you for taking your time out of your busy day to be with me today. And I wish you well in all that you're doing because your success um, is our success in the sense that we can share that with you and we can cheer you on and as you move forward.
I appreciate that.
And everyone, this is something you can go do. I mean, you have to make a decision and you have to take the steps, but you can go do that. I mean, all of us who have started something, we started at ground zero. So you can start at ground zero, or you could go try something. If you never tried anything, then you never know, you don't know what your potential is. I like what you had to say about potential because I see potential as unlimited and will never be fully fulfilled during the course of our lifetime. So maybe it's time to start fulfilling your potential. So
Couldn't agree more.
I hope this has been encouraging to you all. And I thank you for watching. And we'll see you soon, David. And we'll see you next time here on the Eddie Network podcast. Bye bye.